Hello, everyone. Good morning. How many people know the Duchess of Kanta on Instagram? How many people know Lip Gloss Mafia? AKA the crazy book lady. AKA something bookish. How many people know Pretty X Bookish? And how many people know this underscore bookish girl? It's lovely to be here with you all. Thank you so much, Auntie Lola. I am blown away. This is a dream come true for me. But, well, this is not about me. It's about you all and us all. I prepared a few questions. I know we'll all be eager to, I don't know, the audience, should be eager to know the answers too. And I'm going to start slow. Yeah, so I'll start with you, Amin, and then the questions will go, So the first question is, have any publishers ever contacted you to promote a book you didn't like? And how did that go?
To avoid, first of all, thank you so much, LS, for having, and I'm so excited to have this panel at AKA so that now no one will send me books in exchange for, yeah. Books is not pay. We'll talk about, it's not payment, yeah. So to avoid issues like this, I have a review policy on my page. So people or publishers know the kind of things I like. For instance, if someone were to send me, say, a self-help books,
Who moved my cheese?
I would know they did not go to my page or they don't know what I am about. And obviously, I'm not going to be of service to you because you've not seen self-helps on my page. So what's the point? So I think most of them do the work. No one sends me, they always ask first. So if I want it, yes. If I don't want it, yeah.
No, Kukanya?
Hi, everybody, first of all. This actually happens to me all the time. I don't know. Yeah, I do get, publishers tend to reach out when they have a new release, right? A hot new release in all genres. They reach out. So typically I will just, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I ghost the email, especially if it's a big publisher, I'm just like, no. But sometimes they just send it, and unfortunately, like, I just don't believe in reading things you don't like, so sometimes I just won't read it, which is why I think the publishers who do what a lot of publishers are starting to do, the PR lists and the asking you to request things specifically works so much better, because then you ask for the things that you want, they send it if they feel like it, sometimes they don't feel like it, but then you only get things that you like. So it does happen, and then sometimes I'll read it, and I knew I was gonna hate it, and I do hate it, and then I just go in online, so yeah.
I think my answer sort of like mirrors what they've both said. Definitely a lot of times where you get requested to review a book that is either something you wouldn't pick up to read. So I am very jealous, I'm very protective of my time and what I actually read. So if I feel like it's a book that's not gonna connect, and I also don't want to read books and give bad reviews. I don't want to read a book and then trash it, and I knew I was probably not going to enjoy it before I picked it up. I don't think that's fair, because I think every book has its readers. Yes. And if I feel like this is not something I am necessarily drawn to, then I will politely decline. Yes, but also so this is like back in the day when, and Amin can remember this, when we were trying to figure out, so we found ourselves in Bookstagram. It wasn't a thing, right? Like, I don't think there's somebody who built Instagram. It was just a very organic connection of people who love reading and talking about books. And then it just sort of like morphed and grew into this thing, and you start getting attention and you start getting requests, right? But I think even at that time I was very intentional, because my journey towards reading has been a very intentional journey. what I pick up to read has always been very intentional. And maybe as we get into the conversation, I can speak about that journey. And so I've always been very guarded about what
Thank you.
so thank you.
Thank you. So anyway, I think this will segue into my next question. I wanted to ask you all what you think about virtual book tours. I see they are a thing, especially for books promoted by international publishers. First of all, it gives a lot of, I hate to call us book influencers, but we're not, we love books. But it gives us exposure. It gives us a platform, first of all. And I think it should be a thing. But what do you think about that for African books and African publishing in general?
I think you should go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the virtual book tours, I'm of two minds about it. Because my trouble with virtual book tours is that you typically find that somebody's getting physical books and somebody's getting to do the in-person things. It's just never African readers. So that's where it becomes very dicey for me, particularly when it's books published by one of the big publishers. Is that it's why also the conversation around ebooks is the same for me. Is that typically what will happen is that in the UK or the US, or even sometimes in South Africa, there will be an actual event, an in-person event, and people with physical copies, and they'll get PR boxes, and it'll be a whole thing. And then you as the African reviewer, you will be asked, do you want a PDF of the book? And so that's where it becomes dicey. But I think from a perspective of, if you're talking about creating like online community, and if everybody is being seen happen with some publishers, particularly smaller presses, where everybody will get an e-copy, everybody will be on Zoom, then it levels the playing field, and I feel like that I'm fine with. But when I can clearly see, because we all follow each other, so you see who's unboxing and getting sneakers, versus you are being told, here's an email. So you see it, so that's the part about it where I feel like I'm a bit dicey about the virtual space right now, probably in the future when it becomes a lot more like equal, but yeah.
Again, echoing. So that's going to be my thing for the day. I just want to echo what everybody else is saying. But yeah, it's kind of like a two-faced coin or whatever, in that for African book influencers or African literary activists, the treatment has not historically been the same, and I think it's getting better, to be honest. It's definitely getting better, because I'm seeing a lot more publishers recognizing the importance of also including Africans in the conversation. But there was a lot of work that went into it, and a lot of pushing, and just Africans coming together and saying, we have a voice and we want it to be heard. And we are the ones who sort of like pushing these books into into the African markets. And I think that is paying off. And I see nowadays a lot of publishers are sending actual physical books. Because I remember the first time I got a physical book, it felt like I had won $1 million.
Okay, speaking about the work that people had to do to make sure these publishers start sending books. So I've realized that it pays to use the third world country card sometimes, which I use. Yes, I do it, because what do you mean you don't send to the international? What does that even mean? You people doesn't. So what I do is I'll be like, okay, reader, books to grammar, but if you can only send one, let's do it this way, yeah? Send me like 5 copies, and I will help you push it to people who read here. Yeah. So after doing a lot more of that, we start getting people's other readers' emails into their email lists, and then that's just part of the work. We're just pushing it so that everybody, not everybody, it's not all of them that are brain, but most of the ones that give themselves some sense, they've realized the value of having, say, African readers by books written by Africans. Because I think there was this book that everybody, a lot of us here, there are bookstagrammers here, a lot of us were upset. And I think it was a book by How Beautiful We Were. And this is a Cameroonian author, yeah? And we were seeing it in France. We were seeing people getting it in Australia. And I was like, are we that? Is it that far? Like, how much? And these are not small publishers. So I understand it when it's an indie press, a small press. These days, I'm giving a bit more grace. Yeah, I'm giving grace. If you can't, I will not accept PDF, but I will take, say, an EPUB. But that's when I have seen that they've done the work. But a lot of small presses are actually kinda to sending books out. Of their...
So for the publishers, we expect a lot, really. I think we should be treated better. So I want to go a bit personal this time. I know all of us have this in common. I know I speak for all of us. We've all loved books since we've known ourselves. We were probably born readers. So I now want to start again with Muthoni from the end. What one book changed your life?
No, I think for me that's a simple question. And every time I talk about the book, I think people get it for the wrong reason. And maybe I think it's a perfect question because maybe then I get to explain it in terms of why that book for me was so significant. And that is Americana. Yes. Yes. Yes, and I get that a lot. Like, Americana, why? Okay, so, picking up from what you said, we all grew up reading, I was a voracious reader, and I was a smart kid. And I consumed books. Like, books were my life. Books was how I understood the world around me. Books was how I was able to, what's happening. That's how I was able to travel as a child. And then, so I know, we've been sitting here for 3 days and everybody has gotten very personal and vulnerable. And I kind of feel like it's a moment. Is it a safe space? Okay, so let me walk you through my journey and why, for me, Americana is very, very significant in just shifting sort of like my life in a different tangent. So yes, smart kid, best grades, graduated top of my class. And Nairobi is a hub for a lot of international organizations. I've been born and raised in Nairobi. And when I did finish my uni, I got my dream job before I even graduated. So this was in an organization that had really, really, really wanted to get into, international, and I had walked the path of, be good in school, graduate with good grades, and then get a job. And for me, that was the job. And I knew that this was, my life was about to take off. I was about to hit levels of success. I was about to success like success has never successed. No kidding. I knew I was on my way to the top. And so I get into this job and I'm feeling like I've arrived, and I was 22. I was in my early 20s, 22, 23. And then as I'm settling into this job, and I don't know if it's the same in other African countries or in Nigeria, but in a lot of international organizations, there are ceilings, right? There are very institutionalized inequalities in those organizations. And so as I was trying to settle into my job, there were positions that I found could only be held by certain nationalities, and that wasn't my nationality, or certain races. So now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I thought I was gonna, like in 2 years, I was going to be seconded to New York, and I was gonna work in this huge job, but then I got to a point where my nationality became an issue, right? And it's things I could not control. My race became an issue, so I could only get as far as I could see it, and that sort of like sent me down a dark place, right? Because all the sort of like the dreams and the ambitions that I had, I felt like this is going to be curtailed by something that is completely out of my control, right? And there was nothing I could do, and so I was angry at being Kenyan. I was angry at, you know, like, why didn't my parents move to the US? You know? And I got into like an existential crisis and an identity crisis. You see where it comes in. And so in 2013, Americana came out. And yes, so I finished uni, say like in 2010. And so it was 3 years of just not understanding what's going on. And then Americana came out in 2013. And I just picked it up because, it sounded like a good book and it's Americana. And, you know, I'm still wondering why I wasn't born in America. And I encountered Ifemelu. I encountered Ifemelu in that book, growing up in Suka, in this university town. And I could see, like, that was the first time I saw myself in a book. That was the first time I saw myself in a book, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I actually have permission to exist. You know, and Ifemelu goes on a different journey. Like, she's not one of my favorite characters, I'm not gonna lie. I think she's very problematic. But she goes to America, and, you know, she's also dealing with issues of identity. Being a woman, being an African, you know. And so all these issues that she's grappling with in America, I'm finding myself asking myself the exact same questions in Kenya. You know, when I look at her upbringing, I'm like, this is so similar to my family setting. You know, middle-class family, you know, falling in love as a teenager and all these things. And I felt like that book gave me permission to exist. It did. And seeing Ifemelu on the pages of that book, I was like, oh my God, it felt like a drug. And I was like, I need more of this. I need more of this. I need to read. I need to find another one. And I found Lola Shonein. Yeah. And I found, you know, and I found Bettina Gapa. And I found all the writers that were, you know, putting out books around that time in the early 2010s. And it just, like, everything that I have done since I read Americana started at that moment. Yeah, so.
Okay, so it's interesting because my favorite book, the one that I think changed my life, is also an African lit book, and I think it's a similar, that early 2010s era of like African lit. So I grew up in South Africa. I grew up in like very white suburbia South Africa. I'm an English major as well, so you can imagine what English major in South Africa looks like. The books we were reading, like I didn't read any African lit until I was in varsity, and I think it was like third year. It was the first time I picked up an African lit book. Like before that, it was all Shakespeare and all the rest. Like that's where our curriculum was at that time. So, and also growing up, I feel like a lot of people will relate. I was in the Twilight era. That's all we had was like the Vampire Diaries, Twilight types of books. So I was an avid reader, so I like inhaled all of those books. And it wasn't until I think the two books that like shifted me in two different ways. The first one was the first time I read Nervous Conditions by Titi Dangaremba. I think for me was that moment of being like, I think the way she articulates in that story, the kind of experience of being Black and a woman, and the way that she articulates that struggle is something that I think I was struggling to articulate for myself for a long time, because I come up my family is Xhosa very much. Like my family is very traditional, and yet I grew up in an environment with a mom who always taught me to kind of be a woman who stands on her own. So kind of challenging that kind of structure. So there was that book, and then the one that I read that earlier, and then the one that really shifted me in a completely different way, and I think I read it before I started avidly reading, was Under the Udala Trees by Chinelo Paranta, which is my actual favorite book, because for two reasons. One, I think it's just incredibly well written, but I think as well, as far as like queer stories are concerned, I think it was the first time I ever read an African queer story. I think it's the first one I ever read where I said, oh, okay, so people like these kinds of stories exist and they can be written well and they can be given a semblance of hope. I know somebody yesterday was like, this is not a happy book. I feel like for me that book is hopeful. I know in a way that I think a lot of queer stories are not, and a lot of just in general stories about women are not. And so those two books, I think for me, are the foundation on which like I built the rest of my love for African literature and reading in general. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean,
At first, when you asked the question, I was like, this is not fair. And then they come up with this deep stuff, and I'm like, wow. I have been reading for the longest time. The thing is, I can't pick one book. I can't, wait, you understand why. I grew, like a lot of Lagosians, I grew up in a Chrislam household. I went to church on Sundays. I went to Ilekeu. But what brought me to reading was escaping household responsibilities. So we grew up the family house. Anytime my dad came back, I just escaped into a book. And my mom was working in a school. She told me that the only way I could get new books was if I read fast enough, and then she could get more books from the library. And I think that's how I trained myself to become a fast reader. So I read, and then we would have chats because she wanted to know. It's not like you're just skimming. We would have little chats. And I'm like, I read the book. So I can't pinpoint one book and say this was the moment, because all the books I have read up until now, the great ones, the mid ones, the meh ones, they have shifted different things in me. So it's hard to pick one book. And I think everybody we need to hold that space, because it's very, because if you ask me for a favorite book, I'm going to ask you, like, do you mean this month? Because I can give you a book for like, even the entire year.
not favorite
or
book.
the book that had,
I think they both spoke about books that sort of changed their perspectives
I see.
on what.
I've been reading too much, and I studied, like, I love the book so much. I was like, I want to do literature, so I was in arts class. I went to uni, I did English literature. They said you should go for masters. I did something media related, but I was like, it's not enough. Then I did another master's comparative literature. Like, I have been reading, like, so I can't say there's one. No, it's hard. It's hard. As I'm still I'm thinking about it, it's such a hard question. But if you say authors, for instance, I mean, I can give you, say, like maybe 5. But books. Okay. I mean, not to be a teacher's pet. But The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's lives, it's such a good book.
Yes.
Yeah? And for me, who studied the life out of books, reading that book, I was like, I can just read it and just chill. Like, if we should actually start doing that if we were curating, say, beach reads. That's a book I will put on that.
Yes.
And because African books are always so
Heavy.
not heavy, but like expected to teach you things,
Okay.
About the culture, the people. They are not just books, So reading The Secret Life, wow. It did things
I feel you.
to me. Yeah. I'm a big fan.
I know. Teacher, don't worry. So, moving on. Oh, she said 5 authors.
Yeah, is there time?
Oh.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. The second one is by Sarah Mayinka Ladipo. I mean, I feel like everybody knows that. Like a mule bringing ice cream to the sun. I have read that book every year since it came out. I'll be reading it again like the 9th time this year. And every time I read that book, I experience something new. And this is to any author here. We need more older female characters in books. So anytime, Dr. Mariah is one of my Hall of Fame characters. I want to be like Dr. Mariah so bad and be so cool at that age. Like, she gives me something to aspire to. Let me not go too much. Okay, third. Jennifer Nasugo Gamakumbi. And I can't pick one of her books. It's all of her books. All of her work, including the one she's working. In fact, if she writes a newspaper, anything, I will read it. Everything. She said she was inspired by Chinua Achebe, and she was trying to do that with Ugandan literature. So the first time I read Chintu, but can anybody remember the prologue in Chintu? Can you remember how powerful it was? And then you follow the entire book, the amount of detail, the amount of research and it doesn't seem too researchy. It's a saga. God. Jennifer Makumbi. I'm sorry. Number 4? Oh, 4. I'm sorry.
Talk.
Elif Shafak. I mean, if I don't mention her. The first time I encountered Elif Shafak was 10 minutes, 39 seconds. And, oh my God. The premise of this book is a girl who is killed in the most gruesome way, and we are experiencing her life backwards. No, this is not spoiling. This is literally in the title. And it's a book about friendship. It's a book about the culture. And when I got into that book, I started reading everything Elif Shafak wrote. And everything she writes speaks to me. So that's number 4. I mean, I was going to. Now you've spoiled it. Chimeka Garrix is one of my favorite male authors. And I know sometimes I can be dramatic about, books by male authors. Because sometimes you're reading your book and you're like, this is such a man. So man. A man manning. But Chimeka Garrix writes with a sensitivity that I appreciate. His female characters, he's warm. The characters are 3D. The stories are underrated. We need more Chimeka Garrix books. Maybe when he sees this, that third book that we have been waiting for. So yes, these authors.
Okay, thank you very much. Beautiful answers, very insightful. I'm going to tell a short story before I ask my next question. Typically on Bookstagram, this year I haven't been very active on Instagram, lives and all that. But I tend to have a theme each year. One year it might be the books I've read. Another year it might be the books I've bought, So I remember when I was going through my books I've bought, I actually bought this book, which was a collected speeches of Winston Churchill, because I read everything. And then Bookstagram wasn't really the big community it is now. I'm talking about 4 or 5 years ago. And I had this lovely follower, we used to talk in the DMs, and she's of Asian origin. And she immediately came at me and was like, why would you buy this book? And I said, well, Winston Churchill helped win the Second World War, didn't he? He's a respected orator. I want to know what he says. And no, Winston Churchill is evil. He killed many people. And I never knew about that. I just loved the book. And I was really, really taken aback. And she cussed me out and unfollowed me and blocked me, you know. And so I was hurt, and I'm still hurt, even though I can't remember her name right now. But the question I now want to ask is, have you ever been cancelled for your opinion on a book?
No, okay. No, I haven't been. Though I know there was a time when I first started writing just reviews on Instagram. I was talking to you about that this morning. I wasn't yet aware of the power of words. And I apologize for that time, but hey, we're all growing. But there's one book that was sent to me by a friend of mine who was trying to push a book for an author. I will not talk about that book because... So I read this book, and I did not like it at all. And I'm going to share my thoughts. I went to my page. I was like, this book should be banned. Like, who wrote this book? Like, stop writing this. Don't do it again ever in your life. That kind of vibe, yes. But by the way, I've removed that review because I had to. When you grow up and
When
you
you're awakened. When you're awakened.
It's like, why am I living? What's the purpose? But the author was quite upset. I can say this because I'm not saying the name of the book, yeah. I mean, the book did not bang. At the end of the day, it was a badly written book, yes. But no. The author was quite upset and called me out and said I was witch hunting him. And, I said the gender. Fuck. Sorry. So he said I was witch hunting him, and he said I was never going to amount to anything. I was just someone who was posting stuff on Instagram. But I mean, he was just one of, but it's okay, we've learned our lesson. But that's the only person I can say. But he didn't cancel me per se.
Yes.
I mean, he
just
blocked
felt
me
you were too harsh.
for his peace of mind, obviously. But I haven't, and it's not even a case of me being careful now. It's just now my vibe is do unto others what you want them to do to you.
Yes.
So if now any review I put out, I can say it to the author's face. Like, I'm not afraid again. Like, if I've put it out, we will have that conversation. Like, bro, was your editor high? Like, I will tell you now. No, but like, I don't use harsh language anymore. But I stand by anything I post now. I've not been cancelled, no.
Yeah.
No.
I feel like you make me feel like a bad person because I kind of go in still. Have I ever been cancelled? No. I think my reviews sometimes do go a little bit, I go in a little bit sometimes. Sorry. I agree, like, if I will say it online, I wouldn't necessarily say it to your face, please don't come up to me. But I meant it. And I think that I haven't really had interactions with authors, but to the question about books, to the example you were using, I think there is a tendency now, especially online, the trigger is very short now, or people are very trigger happy now when it comes to what you are reading, what authors you are reading, whose books you are reading, and what they think about that author's political stance and whether or not you should be reading their books, specifically on Instagram and on TikTok especially. But this idea that there are authors who, for whatever reason, have been cancelled for good reason or bad reason or whatever the case may be. A good example, our very famous Wizard book, where it is a huge problem where if you are reading it or posting it online, you do tend to get a wave of this kind of like backlash for reading certain authors and reading certain books, which I agree with, but I disagree in the sense that I think that it's very dangerous to kind of create this kind of culture of censorship, because I think there's a part of it where people are going to still be reading those books, and we're not going to be engaging with those ideas and not understanding what other people are reading. So I think it's important for everybody to be reading everything. like with the Winston Churchill example, we need to know what Winston Churchill thought, because he was really influential, and even men like him, we might not agree, we might think that they are horrible human beings, but how do you address, quote unquote, an enemy if you've got no idea what they're thinking? There are things and ideas and books that you have to engage with. We can't just kind of exist in these silos and kind of read in echo chambers where you're only going to read books by people who think exactly the same as you, because then how are you going to know what the people who you are challenging are thinking if you won't engage with those kinds of ideas? So I think that is the kind of climate we're in now, which I try to stay away from as much as I can, and just read what I want. And then if people feel like sliding my DMs, I ignore everybody, so it's fine. So, yeah.
Yes, I haven't been cancelled yet. But I guess also, I want to say I'm also a very intentional reviewer. And when I do put out reviews, I definitely do negative reviews, but I don't really consider that negative reviews, because I sort of like, there are books that are hard to put a case for, but I always try to say something positive, because I don't think a book in its entirety is horrible. So I'll try to find the nuggets, like this is what I enjoy, or this is the reader that I feel this book is going to connect with. And so I haven't personally been cancelled, but I have been part of those conversations. Conversations around, this book is, you're not supposed to write this book. And at some point there was a lot of policing on
but it's important to talk about money. We're pushing out books, making a lot of money for publishers and authors and all that. And too often, for the generous ones, maybe you get a mug and a piece of chocolate or something, you don't get any piece of the pie. Mothoni runs a bookshop. Yay, you, congratulations. You know, I know you started selling on your virtual bookstore, something bookish.
I used to.
I
I
know.
used to. So
Yes.
please let.
No, I mean,
I
way
used to. I
back,
started.
and,
I started
and
selling
merchandise
books.
and all that, and it's all a thing in the past. And the thing is, if it was booming, I don't think it would have stopped if
No,
you were
it
making
was.
money. Oh,
It was,
Mm.
and that's why sometimes when people say Nigerians don't read, I actually want to fight. It was booming. I was making a lot of money. Aside selling the books, I was getting offers to curate personal
Libraries.
gift. No, not libraries.
Okay.
I haven't got a library gig yet. If you want to be the library, like, holler at me. But like gifts, gift boxes. There was my favorite one. Someone wanted to propose to his girlfriend, and she followed me. So he DM'd me and said, what kind of books will be good to
For
plan,
her.
not just for her, to
Oh.
plan the proposal. He wanted to
Wow.
propose through the books. It was
That's our
till
kind of
date.
man.
Where are these men?
They're like 2 years. They are married now 2 years.
Honestly, does he have brothers?
Wait, I know. They were gonna ask if he was another man. I'm sorry. And it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. It was the people we know who are the ones that will kill you with romance. Yoruba men. See. It's Yoruba men. I mean, even if they'll break your heart later, you will have a good time. But yeah, I was making a lot of money selling books. I stopped because I was also working. I was starting a new job at the time when I started selling the books. And the thing is, I didn't have enough reading time anymore because sourcing the books, curating. That's why I shout out to booksellers. Like, you guys are doing the damn thing. I did not have any time anymore to read. And because I was selling the books that appealed to me the most, I wasn't selling for Gbogbo. I was like, I liked it, I am selling it, but I didn't have time to read anymore. So I just
brings me
stopped.
back to my question, talking about making money from books if you're not selling, or rather, as we are reviewers, we love books, we read them, we enjoy them. Sometimes we're asked to push them, but like you're spending time, even though it's time that you would give away for free, but then it would be nice to be appreciated in some way. So what do you think about that whole thing? Because I know some reviewers review for money.
We've spoken about this
So many times.
Okay, so the money thing is, because it is very true, we get paid in vibes at this point. Like, okay, so let me just say, I think that there is a difference in, when you talk about Bookstagram and Book Talk, there are different functions that are being played. Book reviewing is not the same as straight content creation when you are doing the marketing side of it. Because then, when you are doing the book tours, when you are doing the author interviews, when you are doing a bunch of marketing work, it is not the exact same thing as book reviews. I do not charge for book reviews. I think most of us don't, because I think there is a question about the integrity of the review when you are being paid to do it. But there is an entirely different lane that exists within the whole process, which is the publicist marketing part of it, where social media content creators, bookstagrammers have taken on the role that traditional marketing used to do, because as they say, you go to where people are, you find people where they are. If people are online, that's where, so the marketing budgets that publishing houses have are in theory supposed to be funneled into social media creators. Because when you are doing a come book shopping with me and you're going to go buy the book, which is something that I've done before, that is paid work. It's not the same as sitting my thoughts on the book. So I feel like you've said this before as well, that like when you do publicist work, when authors even or publishers reach out and they want you to be part of the marketing campaign for the book before it comes out, or when they want you to do the big splash, that is paid work. And at this point, like, for the most part, depending on, but mostly with the big publishers, I don't really do that for free no more, because I feel like I feel like as you said, somebody is making money, and I don't understand why it's like we must be the only people, because I feel like from the whole process, even though arguably authors are not paid as much as they should be, everybody else in the ecosystem of books makes money except for the social media arm, which are the people who are putting the books in the hands of the readers. So it seems like a little bit of an unequal exchange, and like a book is not the equivalent of like free labor. It's not, it's like below minimum wage even. So yeah.
I love that response. Mine is, I think, a bit different. It's working? Yeah. Mine is a bit different because I started, say, like Bookstagram or reviewing books on Instagram, on the internet. I had a blog. The blog grew into a bookstore. So, and the intention was just basically putting this reviews out and getting people to read with me. So the store is called Somanami, and Somanami is Swahili for read with me. And that was like an invitation for people to read with me, to journey on the journey with me. So I never really looked at it from a commercial perspective, right? But then, and then the struggle with publishers, I'd had enough. Trying to get paid, and then there are conversations around authenticity. If somebody pays you, I don't encourage like the paid reviews thing, because somebody is paying you, you're going to be, it's not an honest review. So those conversations were ongoing about, is it a paid review? So I got creative, right? I got creative and I was like, you know what? If I post a book on Instagram, 10 people want it, 30 people want it, 50 people want it. I'm gonna get it for them, right? And so that is how Somanami, it's a whole other conversation around Somanami and how that came about, but that was also part of it, right? Like your words have influence and impact, and people want to build from that, and people trust what you're saying. And that's the other thing, you had to retain your authenticity because people trust it. And so the idea of starting the bookstore was, how about you make this available? I'm going to pay myself at this point, right? And I see that, and I see how that grows, because I will put up a review, and in the next 10, 15 minutes, people are asking to buy the book, right? Yeah. And so I have my staff at the store who keep saying, you've not talked about this book, nobody's asking about it. Or why would you, say you didn't like a book? Because now everybody will come and say, Modoni said she's not very sure about it. So I kind of found a way to make it work for me. And I was just tired of knocking on doors that were not opening, so I just got creative with how to work around it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Have you answered the question?
So I do get requests a lot for what are your rates? I'd like you to talk about my book. To write a review about, but I don't collect money for reviews. I have 2 pages, yeah? I have one that is just to promote books. And you can send it and I post it just to let people know your book exists, that it's out there. But if you want me to review your book, I don't accept payment for that. But like Mutoni, I'm also creative about it. Sometimes I help with publicity and marketing. I will collect money for your publicity strategy document because I do that like as work. If you want me to help you execute it, obviously that's extra money. But I have found ways around it because if you see paid comments, paid content,
yes,
and it's
like
a book
red
review.
flag, yes.
Even me, I don't trust what you're saying already
Yes.
because bias. The money is talking. So even if sometimes it's not even plenty, because I know some people will collect like 5K for a review, but the point is you were paid for it, so you are.
So how honest would it
even
be?
if you want to be honest, in your heart of
your
hearts, you'll be like,
integrity,
yeah.
yeah.
Be less.
So that's
harsh.
beautiful.
Yeah.
It's time to throw the questions out to the audience. And so we're going to be taking questions. Yes.
Hi, panel. Hi, Amin. Hi, Nukaya. Hi, Muduni. Hello. So the question I have is around publishing and like authors. So there are a lot of publishers in the room. There are a lot of self-published authors or authors who self-publish. We see what big publishers or what publishers in the West do with book content creators on Instagram, on social media, basically. Are there any strategies that they currently adopt that you would like the people in the room or people in this part of the world to start adopting? Like, yeah.
That's a good question.
One of the things I feel like if it's a hill I'm prepared to die on when it comes to strategies or something that big publishers pay a lot of attention to, that I think makes a lot of difference. And I think that like when you are indie published, it's something that you need to pay attention to. It's the cover of your book. It's one of those things where I feel like we don't talk enough about the fact that like there is a reason why in publishing houses they have entire departments for it. And fair enough, when you have indie published, you don't have the exact same access, but there is a reason why that department exists that does design, because it is a critical part of not only normal readers, but how content creators and how people who are picking up your book are engaging. When you walk into a bookstore, the general fiction section has thousands of books. And if your cover is not direct, or is not like, I almost want to say if it's not vibes, but like, you know what I mean? If it's not like eye-catching, if it's not giving, thank you so much, then then it does your whatever work you've done inside the book a massive disservice, because it is something that makes a huge difference to even those of us who are reviewing books. When you see it online, when someone posts it, if the cover is nice and if the book looks good, even when you send out PR boxes to content creators, which is something that even indie and independently published people do, if you send a PR box, doesn't matter how nice it is, if the actual cover of your book is not giving, thank you, it really does, it has a huge impact on whether or not that book, in my opinion, is going to do well in terms of like people picking it up first, because it doesn't matter how good what's inside your book is if nobody actually picks it up, if that makes sense. So I think that's almost like a strategy or something that huge publishers do that I think is a hugely important part of like, that I think all indie publishers and even people who are independently publishing themselves, self-published, should be paying attention to, if that makes sense. Yeah.
With the red cap.
No grievance. What I want to ask about is regarding the art of reviewing books. I do review books when I like them. And honestly, when I find a book badly written, it's a kind of it feels like a chores, even trying to review such books. And when I review books, what I do is just show others what I have seen in it. So in a scenario where you don't like a book, how do you review it?
You don't.
You don't like a book, so how do you review it after
I
reading?
think that's it. You don't review it.
You've said something about that already.
Yes. I almost wanted to say don't review it. If it's painful, because you've sounded like it's such a painful process to review a book you didn't like. What I try to do with books I don't necessarily like is find graces. I'm not going to talk about every single thing about the book, right? Because you can start talking about the sentences were awful, the plot, the character, everything about it was awful. I also don't think there's just a completely 100% horrible book. And probably I just give too many graces, and that's because I understand the writing process, and I understand how much heart authors put in their work, and I try to find a bit of grace, and I'll probably pick one thing, just the one thing that I felt this was done well, and maybe just highlight that. If it's too painful, if I can't, then I won't review it. Because also, you're not getting paid, you're not getting paid to do it, and you should not punish yourself, and it takes a long time to do a book review. I think anybody who's written a book review, it's an intense process. You have to consider so many things, and then you have to do a draft, and then you have to edit it and make it a bit succinct, depending on the platform you're using. So if it's that painful, don't do it. But if it's something where maybe 80% of it was bad or 70% was bad, and you want to talk about the 30%, then do that. Like, just find the one thing and just, say, thank you for writing the book. We appreciate it. It's in the world. and it's going to find its readers.
Can I just add to that? I just want to say, it also depends for me what it is that when you say you didn't enjoy it, what it is that you didn't like. For example, I think if the book just didn't agree with you, it's fine to not review it. But I tend to find where if there's an issue of representation, or if it's an issue of like, as a Black South African woman or as a Black woman, something you've written there, I have a problem with the way that you've kind of represented something, or you've done something that ties into stereotypes and you haven't finished what you were doing. I think most of my negative reviews come from that kind of place where I feel like there is something you've done here where you either didn't finish what you were doing. You spoke about Black men as fathers, but you didn't finish what you were saying, and so you just kind of left a hanging stereotype for no other reason than you wanted, just for vibes. There was no structural reason to why you wrote what you wrote. Those are the reviews that I feel like, as a reviewer, I almost feel like it's your responsibility maybe to kind of engage with that, especially when you pick it up from your own lived experience or your own perspective. But if it's just like you read it and for some reason you just didn't like the character, just like, this is just not for me, it's fine to just leave it. But I think part of reviewing books, especially if you want to, if you're doing it for the thank you, for the conversation and for the culture, it's important that you take that responsibility of engaging with things, especially when you see that an author has done something that you find to be problematic, to engage with that in a way that like raises the question for the people who read your reviews. Because I think people trust you, as Mutoni said, people trust your judgment. So it's important for you to also take that responsibility and like use it, if that makes sense.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, wonderful panel ladies. I have the mic. Sorry. Yes, I have a question, kind of following up on what he said. How do you differentiate between when a book is just it's a good book, you're just not the target audience, or it's just not your kind of book? Do you understand? And how do you really state that in your review? Thank you. Oh, and one more thing before I sit down. So, Somanami's bookshop is so beautiful. So if you're ever in Nairobi, please go.
Thank you. Okay, let me take that one. So, I think when you read a lot of books and you properly engage with these books and you engage with other readers, it's easy to tell your own preferences from what others are going to like. And as you're creating content, you but eventually you're able to put yourself in the shoes of other people who like other things. So if a book is not for me at all, I know my preferences, I know what I like, I know what I'm drawn to. If I don't like it, I share that. I have different platforms where I will share reviews that are a bit in-depth. Some places I just share, well done for publishing your book. Hooray, your book is out. I have a podcast where I would probably go in-depth, and even though I want to say everybody should listen to the podcast, I don't know if everybody should listen to the podcast, but I go more in depth because then I'm talking for a while and I can yap. And so the concept of the podcast is to drink and talk about books. The drink does the, yeah. So if I don't like it, you will know I don't like it because language I'm using, I'm explaining it all the time. Like, this is why I do not like. Just like she said, you know what you like. You are engaging with the things that you just didn't vibe with. So I think when you've been reading a lot and you're putting other people in mind, which is what I do. I'm reading for myself and I'm reading for others because when I want to have a conversation with different types of people, I want to meet them where they are. Because people always saying people are boring. And I'm like,
No.
You're the boring one. Because, in fact, if you want to talk about Arsene Wenger, I'm down because I've read his memoir, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So I read everything. So, but I know what I like. And members of my community are aware of what I like. And if I was to read a book that was off-brand, you will know. And you might even want to try it because this is not normally what I would read. So like Walcott's Amin's Eye. So I'm very open And it helps to do that, to be open about what you like. If you don't like it, engage with the things you did not like. But if it was just so bad, just keep it to yourself. If it was too bad to talk about, so yeah.
Yes, please. Yes.
Our queen.
Thank you very much. First of all, I wanted to just celebrate creators who hold it down for African literature. Social media is the future of book discovery. And it's important that we go with the flow, that the culture goes with the technology. And I think when I think of the people who are doing the heavy lifting of making sure that African literature is visible in that space, it is you guys. And I can't, it's so special and amazing. And I don't think that we say it enough to you. And this leads to the question I want to ask. So I teach a social media course. It's about 280 students. I'm in the English department, but it's like social media through the lens of literary studies. And I invited Noku to speak to my class, so it's like via Zoom. So imagine her on this crazy massive screens with my students. Everywhere is dark, it's just her. And she's talking about her work at Pretty Bookish. And there's just this rapt attention. These kids, these are students. The university is in Wisconsin, Madison in the US. And they were blown away. To hear her take them through the logic behind what she does. Because when we scroll through our page and we are just seeing one content, you think that there is a philosophy behind it. There is an aesthetic principle behind it. There is thinking. And just to have her talk about what she does, it was amazing. And they were so inspired because everybody has to write responses to what they listened. And it was really cool to see them just love what she does. So the question I want to ask is, I also noticed that in the literary ecosystem, right, New York Times Review, for instance, still commands a lot of capital. Even if, to be honest, I don't know if they are the ones pushing the most units. Do you get what I mean? One TikTok review could actually help you sell more books than the New York Times could even dream of doing for you. But there's a way that we still just we revere and worship those platforms. So my question to you is, what do you feel, how do you see yourselves being regarded in the publishing ecosystem? Do you think that you are getting the recognition and the regard that you deserve? Or do you think that something has to shift so that the industry can see you as they see the New York Times?
That's a beautiful question. Let me just say something before panelists. I have noticed books now having blurbs by content creators, Instagram handles, And a blurb by the crazy book lady, it will mean a lot to a lot of people. It will sell books. So that's something that, I think publishers can look out for and do more of. It's not just Stephen King, Chimamanda. This is a platform to sell your book, from the blurbs when they get advanced copies and all that.
She copied my answer.
Oh.
But yes, what I wanted to say is definitely there's a shift. And I think it's a shift towards looking at Africa as a different market. I think previously there was no focus on the African continent and how books are sold within the continent. And I guess it's, capitalism and, Africa is really what are we doing in Africa? And so, when you mention the New York Times, that's a very American thing, right? How many of us are reading reviews, consistently on the New York Times? And so how that has shifted is now we've moved onto platforms that are more accessible to a lot of us, and that's how we're able to, push that information. Because even if I, put up, say, I was lucky enough to do a review in the New York Times, it's probably going to be seen by, you know, probably not the people who I want to buy the books in Nairobi, right? And so it's kind of thinking local and also global at the same time. Because my focus is how do I get everybody in this room to buy into the thing that I want to, you know, them to buy into. And so for me, it's always been think local, think global, act local, right? And that has worked. So I think it's a shift into looking within Africa. I mean, look at Nigeria. It's a country with 250 plus million people. That's already such a huge market, right? So yeah, start local.
Our time is up.
Okay. Should I answer? No? Okay. Thank you.
Please wait.